LETTER the 17th of Life in Mexico. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Life in Mexico by Francis Calderon de la Barca. LETTER the 17th. Arrival at Tepenacasco. Lake with wild duck. Ruined hacienda. Sunset on the plains. Troop of asses. Ride by moonlight. Leave Tepenacasco. San Miguel. Description. Thunderstorm. Guasco. Journey to Real del Monte. English road. Scenery. Village of Real. Count de Regla. Director's house. English breakfast. Visit to the mines. The cascade. The storm. Loneliness. A journey in storm and darkness. Return to Tepenacasco. Journey to Sopayuca. Narrow escape. Famous bull. Return to Mexico. Tepenacasco. This is a fine wild scene. The house stands entirely alone, not a tree near it. Great mountains rise behind it, and in every other direction, as far as the eye can reach, are vast plains, over which the wind comes whistling fresh and free, with nothing to impede its triumphant progress. In front of the house is a clear sheet of water, a great deep square basin for collecting the rain. These hagues, as they are called, are very common in Mexico, where there are few rivers, and where the use of machines for raising water is by no means general as yet. There is no garden here, but there are a few shrubs and flowers in the inner courtyard. The house inside is handsome, with a chapel and a patio, which is occasionally used as a plaza de toros. The rooms are well fitted up, and the bedroom walls covered with a pretty French paper, representing scenes of Swiss rural life. There are great outhouses, stables for the mules and horses, and stone barns for the wheat and barley, which, together with the pulque, form the produce of this hacienda. We took a long ride this morning to visit a fine lake where there are plenty of wild duck and turtle. The gentlemen took their guns and had tolerable sport. The lake is very deep, so that boats have sailed on it, and several miles in circumference, with a rivulet flowing from it. Yet with all this water, the surrounding land, not more than 20 feet higher, is dry and sterile, and the lake is turned to no account, either from want of means or of hydraulic knowledge. However, C n having made some observation on this subject, the proprietor of the lake and of a ruined house standing near, which is the very picture of loneliness and desolation, remarked in reply, that from this estate to Mexico the distance is 36 leagues, that a load of wheat costs 1 real a league, and moreover the alcaba, the duty which has to be paid at the gates of Mexico, so that it would bring no profit if sent there, while in the surrounding district there is not sufficient population to consume the produce, so that these unnecessary and burdensome taxes, the thinness of the population, and the want of proper means of transport, impede the prosperity of the people, and check the progress of agriculture. I had a beautiful horse, but half broke, and which took fright and ran off with me. I got great credit for keeping my seat so well, which I must confess was more through good fortune than skill. The day was delightful, the air exhilarating, and the blue sky perfectly cloudless as we galloped over the plains; but at length the wind rose so high that we dismounted and got into the carriage. We sat by the shores of the lake, and walked along its pebbly margin, watching the wild duck as they skimmed over its glassy surface, and returned home in a magnificent sunset, the glorious God himself, a blood-red globe, surrounded by blazing clouds of gold and crimson. In the evening a troop of asses were driven across the plain, and led round to the back of the house, and we were all called out in haste, and each desired to choose one of the long-eared fraternity for our particular use. Some had saddles and some had none, but we mounted to the number of 30 persons, followed by a cavalcade of little ragged boys armed with sticks and whips. My ass was an obstinate brute, whom I had mistakenly chosen for his sleek coat and open countenance, but by dint of being lashed up, he suddenly set off at full gallop, and distanced all the others. Such screaming and laughing and confusion, and so much difficulty in keeping the party together! It was nearly dark when we set off, but the moon rose, the silver disk lighting up the hills and the plains, the wind fell, and the night was calm and delightful. We rode about 6 miles to a pretty little chapel with a cross, that gleamed amongst the trees in the moonlight by the side of a running stream. Here we dismounted and sat by the brink of the little sparkling rivulet, while the deep shadows came stealing over the mountains, and all around was still and cool and silent, all but the merry laughter of our noisy cavalcade. We returned about 11 o'clock, few accidents having occurred. Doña R a had fallen once. Doña M had crushed her foot against her neighbour's ass. The padre was shaken to a jelly, and the learned senator, who was of the party, declared he should never recover from that night's jolting. To-morrow we shall set off for Real del Monte. 17th. After mass in the chapel we left Tepenacasco about 7 o'clock, and travelled, I believe by a short cut, over rocks and walls, torrents and fields of maguey, all in a heavy carriage with 6 horses. Arriving in sight of walls, the mozos gallop on and tear them down. Over the mountain torrents or barrancas they dash boldly, encouraging the horses by the wildest shrieks. We stop at San Miguel, a country house belonging to the Count de Regla, the former proprietor of the mines which we were about to visit, the most picturesque and lovely place imaginable, but entirely abandoned, the house comfortless and out of repair. We wandered through paths cut in the beautiful woods, and by the side of a rivulet that seems to fertilize everything through which it winds. We climbed the hills, and made our way through the tangled luxuriance of trees and flowers, and in the midst of hundreds of gaudy blossoms, I neglected them all upon coming to a grassy slope, covered with daisies and buttercups. We even found some hawthorn bushes. It might be English scenery, were it not that there is a richness in the vegetation unknown in England. But all these beautiful solitudes are abandoned to the deer that wander fearlessly amongst the woods, and the birds that sing in their branches. While we were still far from the house, a thunderstorm came on. When it rains here, the windows of heaven seem opened, and the clouds pour down water in floods. The lightning also appears to me peculiarly vivid, and many more accidents occur from it here than in the north. We were drenched in 5 minutes, and in this plight resumed our seats in the carriage, and set off for Guasco, a village where we were to pass the night, in the midst of the pelting storm. In an hour or two the horses were wading up to their knees in water, and we arrived at the pretty village of Guasco in a most comfortless condition. There are no inns in these parts, but we were hospitably received by a widow lady, a friend of 's. The Señora de in clear muslin and lace, with satin shoes, was worse than I, in mousseline de laine and brodequins. Nevertheless, I mean to adopt the fashion of the country to morrow, when we are to rise at 4 to go on to the Real del Monte, and try the effect of travelling with clear gown, satin petticoat, and shoes ditto, because when one is in Rome, etc. The storm continues with such unabated violence, that we must content ourselves with contemplating the watery landscape from the windows. Tepenacasco. Rose in Guasco at 4 o'clock, dressed by candlelight, took chocolate, and set off for Real del Monte. After we had travelled a few leagues, tolerably cold, we rejoiced when the sun rose, and dispelling the mist, threw his cheerful light over mountain and wood. The trees looked green and refreshing after their last night's bath. The very rocks were sparkling with silver. The morning was perfectly brilliant, and every leaf and flower was glittering with the raindrops not yet dried. The carriage ascended slowly the road cut through the mountains by the English Company, a fine and useful enterprise, the first broad and smooth road I have seen as yet in the Republic. Until it